Hey, you are listening to Oh Crap Parenting with me, your host, Jamie Glowacki. This is a podcast for conscious parents who drop the F-bomb a lot. Hey, welcome, and Happy New Year. So glad you guys are here with me for the new year. I hope you guys had a great holiday and it wasn't too stressful. We kind of went balls to the walls with festivities, gatherings, and oh man, I just wanted to sleep for a week. Once January 2nd hit, I was like, okay, I'm done. I imagine you guys are the same. A week before Christmas, my computer completely shit the bed and just black screen. It actually had I forget what symbol was on it, but it was just dead. So I'm an Apple girl, and I called Apple, and they asked for the serial number, and they laughed at me. They were like, ma'am, your computer's just too old. We can't even fix it. So it was time for a new laptop, which is great. A week before Christmas, right? Our other news is we have our first chick from scratch from our chickens. So typically we buy our chicks from Tractor Supply, or you can mail order them, which is wild. They come in live. The post office calls you and you go pick up your chicks. But we've never done it where a mama sat on the eggs and the egg hatched. And so, I don't know. It must have been November. Yeah, it must have been late November. One of our chickens got broody, and I was like, well, let's just see what happens. And Pascal was like, oh, we can't have chicks in the middle of winter. It's so cold. And typically when you just have chicks, you have to keep them under heat lamps at 95 degrees. But our coop is not insulated, so that would be an uphill battle. And then we decided we could keep them in the basement. We don't have a full basement. It's more than the crawl space we used to have. Once I got my addition, we got a little more room, but you still have to kind of crouch. So we said, let's put them in the basement. But I was like, dude, I can't have a heat lamp in the basement. I would be so scared of fire. So it turns out that only one chick hatched. So we were like, okay, this is an experiment to see if we can keep the chick alive during the winter. Knowing that we might lose the chick, which would be very sad, but we've lost so many chickens. We're kind of used to it by now. And we thought it was worth the learning curve. So we kept them in you keep them in a dog crate that's been fortified with hardwire. And the chick, what I didn't know is chicks just stay in their mom. They get up in her feathers. And so this little chick would poke her little head out and stay warm. So she didn't need a heat lamp, and the heat from the furnace was plenty. And we ended up naming her Meep Meep, because that was her little sound. Meep, 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 meep. So we call her Meep. And we were so scared that she wasn't going to make it. And we'd hand feed her and hand feed the mama, and chickens like meat. So we made sure, mama had a lot of meat, and the baby just loved it. And she ended up surviving and thriving. And then we were getting nervous because the mom was starting to show distress from being alone with the chick. Chickens are flock animals. They have to be with other chickens. And so we again had to risk it because it's cold, and the coop isn't insulated, and they have an outdoor roaming area. And we said, okay, well, let's transfer them to the coop and the flock. And there's also a pecking order with chickens, and it's severe. So new chickens with the old chickens, they start pecking them. So we were super nervous about Meep getting pecked or being too cold. And she's thriving, and it's so cool. She got her feathers, and so she's outside, and she just integrated with the flock. And a couple of the chickens started to peck, but mama was on it. And so Meep is doing really well and integrated with the flock. And she's so cute. When I put out supplemental food, ground beef and eggs and yogurt and things like that. And she'll crawl under their legs, and she'll get her fair share. And mama is really careful to take some food for her. So anyway, that's been a joy. I've been posting some pictures on Instagram if you follow me there, but she's so cute, our little Meep. So we got a chicken from scratch, and we're so excited. So that's our New Year's news. All right, let's jump in with some parenting crap. Yeah. So this episode is called Don't Start Too Late. And there are two areas in which I regularly see parents starting too late. And this is professionally and personally. And one is talking about sex and how babies are made and that whole conversation. And the other is chores. And I know those seem like kind of two different things, two wildly different subjects, but they are two areas in which I'm really seeing people start too late. One thing I see personally and professionally is, oh, my 12-year-old, I have to give the talk to my 12 or 13-year-old. So the days of the talk, the sit down, download all the information, birds and the bees, those days are over. We don't do that anymore, right? The talk is really spread out over your child's lifetime on a need-to-know basis, answering the questions they are actually asking. Oftentimes when a child asks a question, we assume they're opening Pandora's box. How are babies made? That's an example, right? Like, how can you pare that down to an age-friendly answer without downloading all the information? And then with chores, I am regularly seeing this all over Instagram, all over social media is, my 9-year-old doesn't want to do anything. My 10-year-old, I'm starting to introduce chores to my 10-year-old and they're super resistant. Way too late. Talking about sex at 12 or 13 years old, way too late. Trying to introduce chores at 8, 9, 10 years old, way too late. So all these things, like all learning and all, we talk about this a lot on the podcast. And so if you've been following me for a long time, this might sound repetitive to you. I always think it's a good reminder, but I know I also have a ton new followers, ton new listeners. So I want to kind of go over this. We scaffold learning life skills, and we scaffold talking about sex. So what that looks like is, well, let's do chores because that's probably the easier one. Right? So with chores, you want to always have your child be helping in the household. And you don't even have to call them chores. It's part of family living. So when you relegate your child. And I know this is so hard when both parents work outside the home or you're a single parent, you get home at 5, 6 o'clock. It's just a cluster. And so it's easier to make dinner by yourself. It's easier to clean up by yourself. Sometimes it's great alone time. I love listening to podcasts. So I am often in the kitchen. I don't mind being in the kitchen. I'm listening to a podcast, right? But when we relegate our kids to, hey, go watch a program, go play with your brother, I'm going to do the kitchen work, what they learn without any emotion attached to it is that they don't have a place there. And their place is watching a program, maybe some YouTube Kids, maybe some screen time, maybe it's playing with their siblings, but they get the message loud and clear. And it's just learning that that's not my job. That's mom's job. Or that's dad's job, right? And a lot of this falls on moms. And we are constantly bitching about the overload, the overwhelm, the mental load that we take on, but we are unwilling to help, have people help. Now, help from a toddler is barely help at all, right? It's more work. But if you don't start scaffolding this young, then you can't introduce it at 9 or 10 years old. The lesson they've learned for those 9 or 10 years is this isn't my job. And of course they're going to be resistant. Why should I help? You do that. That's not me, right? So you want to start with very easy things. I think being in the kitchen with your kid is the best thing ever. You get your values, your cooking. So much is learned more than sitting down for a family dinner. So much is learned in the kitchen, helping cook and helping prepare food and just being there. And when you are in that cluster at the end of the day, it's 5, 6 o'clock, you're exhausted, you just want to get dinner on the table. That is a great connecting point for your child. Even if they're sitting on the counter just chattering with you, that is awesome, right? Maybe they're not old enough to help. You can just have them there and you're talking to them and, hey, who did you sit with at lunch? What was your favorite color today? Just those really simple questions that kids love. But you can also have them fetch things, hey, can you go get me the celery out of the fridge? So they're learning all kinds of things, not just like food and ingredients that go into preparing dinner, but they're also learning that they're a vital part of the family. And what we're seeing so much right now, and there's multiple factors to this, but what we're seeing is kids are getting pretty entitled because we're not having them take part in the house and be part of the household chores. And I don't believe in allowance for chores. I do believe in allowance for money management, but I don't believe it should be tied to chores. I think chores are just part of living. The thing about toddlers is they want to help. Are they going to be helpful? Not really. It's probably going to be a little more work on your part, but it is worth putting in this work, putting in this time so that they feel part of the family. And here's the kicker. When your child feels part of the family, part of the community, then they are more likely to be cooperative with you, right? Because who wants to be ostracized from their community? Nobody. That's a human need. We all want to fit in. We all want to be part of something. So when we make our kids part of something, they feel more, like a cog in the machine that works and works for flow. And we want that. And they're going to be more cooperative. If we relegate them to another room, we separate them from us. And this is happening a lot with phones, right? Kids are getting phones at younger ages and they're in their own little world and they're not part of our world and part of the house. Then they get reactive when we ask them to do something. They get reactive when we ask them to take part, right? So you really want to think, I really love that word scaffold. You want to just start building things slowly. Toddlers love to help, getting clothes out of the dryer, dragging the laundry basket to the next room, heavy work, right? Helping, oh my God, they love the washing machine. Have them help you load it, get a nice step stool, a nice step ladder so they can reach these things. There is no reason why your 7-year-old shouldn't be doing laundry on their own. Really. So Pascal would do laundry. He was like 7 or 8 and he was doing his own laundry. And we lived on the second floor of a 2-family building. Second floor, the washer and dryer were in a creepy ass basement and he would go down and do his own laundry. So I know this. So I'm not bragging, but I'm saying I know this can work for you, but you have to start it young. Toddlers love cleaning toilets. Love it. Anything with a spray bottle. Of course, you could just do like vinegar and water. You don't want to give them anything, super chemically, but I think vinegar and water works great for cleaning. And so have them start to do that. Clear the table. You always clear the table and have them like, nope, it's your turn to, clear the table. If you have multiple kids, switch up chores, have a family meeting every week. Who's going to take on what chore? But if you don't start this young and you spring it on your 9-year-old, of course they're going to be resistant. They're going to be like, what the hell? This isn't my job. So don't start that too late. All right. Now let's handle the sex talk. Now, of course, talking about sex and these, intimate details of physicality between humans is a highly individual, personal thing. And, your beliefs, your faith, your religion, these all may play into how you handle this. I really believe that it is better to handle it little by little over time and not use euphemisms. I know it's very tempting, how our baby's made. Oh, God planted a seed. That's a very common one. And technically it's true, right? God didn't plant the seed. But I think it's best to eke out the information slowly. And I think as a mom of an 18-year-old, what I can tell you I have learned, and this is more, obviously less professionally and more personally, is parents drop the ball on this talk. They don't talk enough about periods for girls. They don't talk enough about masturbating, about all the things that come along with puberty. And so they kind of hit it as puberty hits. And what happens is once puberty hits, your child is so embarrassed. All these hormones are raging. They may not know that masturbating is normal. They may not know how everything's working. It might be freaky. And so they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to listen to you because they're so embarrassed. So if you sit down and try to have the talk about these kinds of things at 12 or 13, it's going to be like, oh my God, Mom, stop talking. Or, oh my God, Dad, stop talking. And I think you should get really comfortable with all genders talking to all genders. So I of course, I'm a single mom and I have a boy. So I had to get real comfortable with talking about boy things with my boy. And I think we should not leave moms to talk to girls about periods and dads to talk to boys about whatever. So I think we need to really cross-reference our genders so that we know that dads are comfortable with periods. We know that moms are comfortable with what boys are going through. Okay. Now, the big thing that I feel very strongly about is that I think the mechanics of sex, how sex works, how procreation works, is the least of your worries. So I think that information should be given somewhere around 8 or 9. Okay. Maybe even 7. I would say 7, 8, or 9. For Pascal, it was between 7 and 8 that we really did the mechanics. And I know that might sound scary to you, but I know that like the mechanics of sex do not traumatize a child. Okay. I've had people say that like, oh, once they know about that, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. Here's my argument to that. Farm kids are well versed in reproduction. They know exactly how this works. So it just parlays to humans, and no farm kid is traumatized by it. They've seen reproduction in action a lot. So, and I'm not suggesting that your child needs to see your reproduction. But the mechanics are very easy. And when they're 7, 8, or 9, they're curious, they're listening, and more importantly, they're like, ew. And we want them to be like, ew. So Pascal himself was like, he called it coupling. He really liked model trains. And if you've ever seen model trains or trains, they have a mechanism that literally like clicks in, and it's kind of like a negative and a positive that just click in, and it's called coupling, which I think is a really funny word because that's kind of what we do when we click in, when we're human Legos. And so I think, so with him, he was about 8 when we really went through the mechanics of it. And I remember he had so many questions. He was so funny. We talked a lot. I got a book, and for the life of me, I don't remember the name of it. I know you guys are going to ask, but what you want to look for is a book with anatomical images of male and female. And it really helps when they have pictures and pointing. And the one we had was illustrated. So it wasn't obviously, it wasn't like a real picture. I would imagine they're all illustrated for kids. And you just want to explain the body parts. And I feel very strongly, starting right from the get-go, that we explain body parts with the real name. And then we give the nicknames or the euphemisms. So I would, when Pascal's first discovered his testicles, he was pretty amazed. And I said, well, those are your testicles, I said, and some people call them balls. And he was like, yeah, because there's like little balls. And I was like, yeah, exactly. And, then one day he came home, I don't know, he was probably like 6, and he was like, Mom, you know what some people call their balls? They call it their junk. And so he was like fascinated that there was another name for it. So, and I like to give the real name and then what common nicknames are for it, because again, this plays into, we know that kids who have been sexually assaulted, oftentimes people miss it because parents have used euphemisms for that. And so, there's a thing circulating online. I don't know if it's true or not, but it brings home the point where a little girl was going to her teacher and saying, my uncle ate my cookie. My uncle ate my cookie, or my uncle licked my cookie. And the teacher was like, okay. And it turns out that her parents were using the word cookie for her vagina. And so she was being sexually assaulted, and everybody missed it because they were using a nickname. If you're a grown up, please don't say down there. Especially if you're a man, not down there. There's no down there. Don't say down there. We have vaginas. 50% of the population has vaginas. I think even more. So let's stop that. And then, with periods, I think it's also great to talk to boys about periods. And I think it's great to talk to girls about period. And I think it's really great to start not just introducing periods as this, like, you're going to bleed, but I think it's really important to introduce the cycles. We know so much more now about this, our full cycle and the various phases, and, what ovulation means, and the follicular and the luteal, and what all this means, because that's wisdom that girls can learn and cycle their workouts. And it explains so much of like hormonal, what we call hormonal is being hormonal, but it explains like, okay, like I explained to Pascal once he hit puberty about the cycles, because I was like, dude, there's going to be a week where she cries. Like, you're not going to be able to say anything because she's going to cry. There's going to be a week where she's like, yeah, let's go. And there's going to be a time where she is all over you. The pheromones are going crazy. You're going to be horny. She's going to be horny. Back off of that stage. That's when she can get pregnant. So, introducing these things along the way. But I think that is the kind of information you need at 13. The kind of information you need at 8 I should back it up. The kind of information you need when they're 2, 3, 4 are the anatomical names, the correct names, common nicknames, and that kind of thing. Then there can be, I think there should just be, what do I want to say? A relaxedness around when you, mom, get your period. So I think kids should be in the bathroom with us. I think explaining a tampon is just a piece of cotton. Yes, all women bleed. It's part of their reproductive cycle. That's a complete sentence. Yes. And I remember Pascal being concerned that I was bleeding. And I was like, no, honey, I'm not hurt. This is part of the female reproductive cycle. I specifically used bigger words so that he wouldn't question it. He was like, oh, okay. Then when he was like 4 or 5, we talked about eggs. We looked at a picture of the fallopian tubes and how that works and the ovaries and eggs. And somewhere he was like 4 or 5 and he got confused that like women laid eggs like chickens. And I was like, you know what, we'll revisit this in a couple of years. Women don't lay eggs. And so, just every year we kind of added on a little more information. So he got very comfortable with body parts of both genders. And, and then we started talking about coupling and he was like, I don't think I ever want a couple. And I was like, no, you're 8. You shouldn't want a couple right now. I said, but when you hit puberty, you might start having feelings like you want a couple, and then we'll talk about it again. And so we put a lot off, like there was a lot of talk of like when you hit puberty. So he was like, when's puberty coming? And I was like, honey, it doesn't like knock on your door. So, his voice started changing and, he started getting a little bit of hair on his legs. And so I asked him one day, I was like, hey, do you have hair, on your balls? And he was like, Mom, don't say that. And I was like, dude, I don't really care. I just need to know where we are in the process of puberty. And he was like, yes, I do. I said, okay, great. Then we need to revisit some of the conversations that we had last year that may not have, fully gone in. So I think that's a good way to approach it. I also think that you have to have your game face on. With him, I had to explain ejaculation and what that meant, and that he might, what are they? I can't even think of. I'm drawing a blank on the word when boys like come in the middle of the night. I forget the term. But anyway, he, so we had to talk about ejaculation, common names or cum, jizz, this, that, and it's going to be this fluid that comes out of your penis. And how does it come out? And I was like, usually friction. I said, you know how when your penis feels really good to touch right now. And he was like, yeah, I said, it's going to feel better. And it's going to feel better when you hit puberty. It's going to feel better when you go like faster. And so, but when I introduced this at 8, so he's like, really? Like he was fascinated instead of being embarrassed. So then when it hit, it wasn't a surprise because we don't know when that hits, right? And boys are going to be pretty private. You'll know because the showers get a lot longer and they do a lot more laundry. but it does, you don't know when that exactly hits. So I think it's better to front load this information when they are curious and listening and they're like fascinated by it, but it's not happening to them. So they have an outsider, like an observer stance. They're like, oh, okay. So then you're not having that conversation when they're 13, because when they're 13, I don't care who you are. And you can say, not my kid. My kid's not interested in girls. And I hear it from every single parent. Not my kid, not my kid, not my kid. I hear it from parents who monitor their kids' texts very closely. Not my kid. And that kid ends up being pregnant at 15. Your kid is going to get horny. Your kid is going to have sexual feelings. Your kid is going to be masturbating. And your kid may be finding pockets of time to do this with another person. And you may think they don't. And I know kids who are under the strictest lockdown and they are still finding ways to do it. So since the beginning of time, teenagers have found time and places and pockets of reality where they can do whatever they want with another person. Not whatever they want, but things happen. That's why we have teen pregnancies, right? So I don't want you to, if you are in this camp and you have a 13, 14-year-old and you're like, nope, 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 still talk about this. Yes, because it is happening whether you like it or not. And our kids become masterful at hiding things from us and hiding their emotions. And Pascal and I have the best relationship. We are super close. It's just me and him. So there's like no other distractions in the house. And he has gotten some things over on me. So, and I say that because I consider myself very aware. I am not, I do not monitor texts. I do not spy on him. I do not, I give him a wide berth, but when I've asked him point blank about things, he has directly lied to my face, and I found out other things were true. And I take it with a grain of salt because he is a teenager and that's his job. But don't think it's not your kid. And I want you to know that 8-year-olds are already talking about this, especially in this day and age where kids have access to computers, access to phones. They have seen something. We used to find like dirty magazines in the woods. That was our like entry point, but kids have phones, and there is a kid in your kid's social circle who has found something online and is showing. So I think it's just really important to not keep blinders on with this conversation. I think it's really important to understand that all kids are the same. And you can swear up and down it's not your kid, but it's going to be your kid. And then I think, when we look at that, we start young and we just start answering questions as best we can, answering the question that the child is asking. So I'll give you an example. I was engaged in 2014, and Pascal walked in on us very early morning. We thought we were in the clear. There was no lock on the door. And, his big concern and his big question was not what was happening, but that he thought I was having a heart attack. And he said, I don't understand how you were having a heart attack, it looked like. And I said, no, it was that what we were doing was, coupling, and it was pleasurable. I didn't give too much information, right? I just answered the question of, I'm not having a heart attack. That was actually pleasurable. And that was enough for him. So make sure, again, you don't like throw up all the information because very often it's not that. How babies are made. You don't necessarily, if your 3 or 4-year-old is asking you that, you don't necessarily have to launch into all the mechanics, but you can also give an answer that's not lying. A lot of people, when mommy and daddy love each other a lot, they make a baby together. That's a perfectly fine answer for a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. Yes. Again, I don't necessarily love the God planted a seed thing, but you can answer it without giving all the information, a sort of need to know basis, And then again, as they get a little bit older, like 7, 8, 9, definitely download the mechanicals, the mechanics of sex. But then 13 to 18, you have bigger fish to fry. And this is consent, managing crushes, breaking up with people kindly, having their heart broken. There are so many more nuanced conversations that have to happen in the actual teen years that have nothing to do with the mechanics. And that's why I think high school sex ed is like ridiculous. They go through the mechanics, which is obviously there's people who need to know, but it really should be about the personality stuff, the crushes, and the red flags. What are red flags in a relationship? Pascal, I was dating this girl, and her text at one point, he was kind of like, I just don't know what to do. She seems kind of crazy. So I said, oh, well, let me see what she's texting. This girl was crazy and passive aggressive and guilting him. And I was like, dude, teaching red flags. What are red flags? 17-year-old girls, and I'm saying this because I was one, there's a lot of hormones happening there, and they're not necessarily the most stable people on the planet. They need a couple more years, I think, to bake. But identifying what truly is, or what do you want in a relationship? What's a red flag for you? What does consent mean? There's a woman who goes around, I can't remember her name, right now, but she goes around and gives talks about consent to high school students. And afterwards she said she has lines and lines of distraught boys who are unsure if what they did was rapey. They didn't it wasn't rape in the typical sense, but that they felt like consent was wobbly and they were unsure and they were distraught about it because of how she had described what consent means and what rape can mean. And so I found that really telling. I was like, wow, these boys are so confused. What does consent mean? It means teaching our girls. What does consent mean? Teaching our girls a no cloaked in laughing and, oh no, I don't think so. That a teenage boy may miss that as a cue, teaching our girls what no means, how you can stop at any point, how to be clear so that there isn't any confusion. And I'm not giving boys an out, but you got to understand that two teenagers going at it, there's very little blood going to the brain. So things can be missed, and that's how shit can happen. Accidentally, you know what I mean? So those are the conversations we have to be having 13 to 18. Protection, what does that mean? And again, if you think I'm not talking to my kid about protection, STD protection for sure, and birth control, if that's within your belief system. But what does that mean? And if it's not in your belief system, what does that mean? Because we know that teaching abstinence doesn't work, right? And so these are the conversations you are going to have from 13 to 18, not the penis goes in the vagina. That's an earlier conversation. All right. I think I've maybe beaten this horse enough. If you have questions, I'd love to hear them. I think it is it's a deeply personal thing. And I know when we talk about birth control, that is a topic that can be, controversial depending on your faith. For me, it's not controversial, but for you, it might be. But these are conversations that you have to have. And regardless of your faith, regardless of how you handle this, I really, really, really want you to not have blinders on and think it's not your kid. I don't need to have this conversation. I don't need to talk about this. And so, yes, I would love for teenagers to not have sex. I would love for everybody to wait till their prefrontal cortex is formed. I would like them to make choices on potential life mates a little later on, but it is happening. And so we need to stay on top of it. And I feel like the people who don't end up regretting it. So with that, I hope that's helpful. Again, if you have questions, I'd love to hear them. And that's it. Happy New Year. And as always, rock on and have a beautiful day.
Okay, bye everyone. Just a reminder, if you need additional resources, I have Oh Crap Potty Training. I have Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler. Those books are available everywhere you want to find a book. You can also go to my website, jamieglowacki.com, where you can book private sessions with me, buy any of my courses. Those are really geared towards potty training help. And also I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook anymore, and I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, jamie.glowacki, and I do a lot of lives and usually posting a lot of good information. So those are extra resources for you. And as always, rock on. Have an awesome day.